Hey everyone! Welcome to another episode of Mupp Panelore. This is Mark Zielinski, and I am joined by an esteemed panel today as our discussion is all about the fluff in the new Mupps Champion rulebook. So joining me today is, of course, the ever-present Wiki Dave.
Hi everyone, and please don't hate me at the end of this episode.
Okay, no foreshadowing there. And,
No.
of course, the fabulous Rob Burman. How are you, Rob?
I'm fine. Please don't hate me at the end of this episode. We'll have to see how it goes.
Oh, there you go. No, I just want to know more about what you wrote, and I'm excited for you to be here. And I'll just say, you know, I really enjoyed it. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, we've got the writer and the nitpicker, me. But I think overall, you know, because obviously we've been given a little bit of an advanced read on it, and overall, it's a great read. It's a great read. I mean, it all comes down to, I think, for a personal preference of what stories you find interesting and what origin stories you find interesting. And there's something in here for definitely everybody. There's a few surprises, a lot of foreshadowing, and there's a lot of references to older events that I didn't expect. And actually one that we covered, Winter's War, there was actually quite a lot of references to Winter's War, which is quite surprising considering we just covered it, but also Winter's War kind of left in a little bit of a cliffhanger, and we'll kind of dive into that as we go along, and Rob can either confirm or deny whatever he wishes, and I'm sure he's got a few others. And we actually have some viewer questions about the future as well when it comes to and the lore as well. So we'll dive into everything we can, and obviously before we do, it's spoiler heavy, so there are spoilers, so I would recommend go out there, get the book yourself. We will be vague on a few things, but we also will give a quick summary, so we're not going to get into the nuts and bolts. This won't be a play-by-play of every character. We'll basically give you a quick summary of the character, go through some key points from this story, and then maybe some questions that it does bring up. So I do recommend anyone out there to get the book, because the more lore that's sold, the more lore we'll get.
Absolutely. So how do we want to kick off, Dave?
All right, so yeah, we'll kick off with some key points overall from the story that I've kind of worked out. Now, the one thing that should be pointed out, there's no specific date given. So all the dates that I will specify, unless I say this event definitely happened on this date, is all approximation. So we can kind of guess that it was around about the year 3870 that all these events take place. But actually, first question for Rob, in regards to the timeline, is all the events kind of at the same time when you're looking at the origin stories, except for the ones that specifically mentioned to actually take place in the past? Is most of the kind of events that happen and the current all happening around about the same time?
Yeah, so I think the idea with Champions is that it's all sort of kicking off in the the modern period, I guess, of Kings of War. So it's kind of after the latest campaign. So this is the
Shadow
sort of period
Horizon.
we're in. Yeah, so because it mentions specifically some of the stuff that's happened there as well. So that's the kind of period that we're in. It's sort of as modern as it gets, I guess, in Kings of War, because Ronnie's always been keen that the storyline moves along. So I guess you could say that these characters potentially will be kicking off a new period in sort of Kings of War lore, and maybe for future campaigns as well.
So the last confirmed date we actually have written down was in the 2022 Clash of Kings, as always referred to, and that was in 3868. So I've kind of put 2 years onto that of the Shadow Horizons took place, sometime between that and this. So I would say right now, and this could be completely wrong. This is just what I put in my head just to keep track of everything, because I find dates and timelines a very better way of following the legacy of a lore. So that's 3870. So it's approximately around there. So some of the ages I have guesstimated it as well, and that's on that particular date there. Also, the overall theme of the lore seems to be of a big secret up north. So up in the Winterlands, where the Northern Alliance, there's some kind of secret happening up there. Now, this is where I'm saying it may hint at it, because at the end of Winter's War, winter kind of dissipated and a laugh kind of echoed through it, and it kind of sounded like she was kind of lost and trapped, maybe possibly under ice. So possibly that's what they're referring to. And there's one particular character that kind of says, okay, that would make sense why he went there. And so we'll go through that when it's there. So that's the overall theme. So if you do want a little bit of inside knowledge, I would say read up on Winter's War, and that may give you a good idea while you read through all this. And also there's, as Ronnie has alluded on other podcasts, there is something happening in the east. There are hints towards the east once more. So the north is bad, the east is bad. Go south or west if you want a holiday. So yeah, those are the overall things. Was that pretty on the money, Ron? Rob, sorry.
I think you got it right there. I think a lot of this stuff, if you go back, I think when this all becomes clear, I think you'll see that it's been teased for quite a long time by Matt. Because obviously we've spoke before, Dave, that a lot of this all exists in Matt's head. So then now he's sort of going out and getting people to write different bits. So I think when it all finally sort of comes together, you will look through different things that have been coming out over the past, years, really, and sort of go, right, I see what was being hinted at here. So, yeah, I think hold on to your hats.
Yeah, I think the first mention of something in the East happened, I think, in one of the Armada supplements, I think it was.
You're probably about right, yeah.
There you go. So when is this all going to coalesce? Do we have is that going to be 4th edition, as I'm guessing, or is it
That's
some
above
other
my pay
point?
grade, that one. Nice try. I don't know that one.
Yeah,
I got to try, Rob.
I'm pretty sure if it doesn't come out 4th edition, there'll be some questions. Like, in my opinion. It'd be like, well, 4th edition is like everything you've been foreshadowing. Because the foreshadowing is only foreshadowing if you have a payoff. Otherwise, it's nothing. It's just endless teasing. Yeah, it's boring. Yeah. Needs to be crescendo or whatever they call it. Anyway, so those are the overall key points, and now we'll kind of go for each one. So obviously we will be revealing heroes that haven't been shown as a model yet. And so, but I mean, obviously they're in the books and people are going to be talking about them. So I would recommend get the book if you are interested in any of these characters, including the ones that have been released, because it actually got me excited. It made me actually want to collect an army that I haven't actually collected yet, and I'll address that when we come to it, and everyone will know which one it is once we get to it. All right, so we'll dive into it. And the first character we'll do is Alanis Stantis. Is it Stalinus? How do you say that?
Sallustis. Yep.
Sallustis. I got made fun of for my pronunciation, and for anyone out there who has a problem with it, deal with it. Anyway, so the too long didn't read for her story is basically she is the Basilean Batman. That's how I interpreted it. Yeah. We did, me and Mark, I think we had a guess that of Dead Parents being the origin story, and that actually turns out to line up pretty well. So basically, Alanis lived in her great uncle, and I put that in quotations, and you'll know why, Shadow. So how do you say his name again? Because it's the GN that throws me off. The GN.
I would always say Naeus.
Naeus. All right.
But bear in mind, none of my pronunciations are necessarily official.
Yeah.
Basileans can't even be said right. Let's be honest.
Well, that's actually going to be one of our projects, Rob. Is we're going to try to get the official pronunciation and then put in the wiki a little box where you can push the button and it'll pronounce it for you.
I'm pretty convinced. I thought Matt had done that before on somewhere. Basilian?
Well, we need to find it.
Yeah, we need to find it. You need to go back and just when you see him, ask him to do it. So yeah, maybe it'll turn up Naeus is like nauseous or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll see him in September. So
I think especially for the Welsh names, because those are a bit problematic just because they're Welsh, and Welsh is a very hard language to pronounce. Anyway, so Alanis lived in Naeus's shadow and was constantly asked about her great uncle, about, he's this awesome paladin warrior, and everyone's just, you're related to him, why aren't you as great as him? Come on, what's taking you so long? And so around the end of the Abyss, which happened between the year 3850 and 3854, so that's around about 15 years before for the events that we're talking about, her parents were actually killed. They were attacked by Abyssals and killed. and she ended up basically becoming Batman and being trained up to become this warrior. Initially, she wasn't going to be put on the front lines because the Basileans like, your name holds so much weight, we can't risk it. But circumstance led her to just fight, and now she leads a particular force. And yeah, that's basically the long and the short of it. So the key facts that we actually learned from this is obviously Gaius. Naeus. Oh god, I'm butchering his name already. He has a brother. Okay, this is where it's going to get complicated because it's not his brother, it's his cousin, right? And if his cousin had a daughter, it would actually be Naeus's first cousin. It wouldn't actually be his great niece, because a great niece is your brother's kid's kid. That right, Rob?
I think from a genealogy point of view, yes. I think from a snappy way to refer to someone, it's probably better. And I think, I mentioned this to you, Dave, I understand that, yes, from an actual official point of view, it should be something not quite as cool as great uncle. But I also think that's, I think maybe I got it from the fact that my cousin's kids called me Great Uncle Bobby. So that's where that came from. So I thought it's more of an affectionate way to refer to him rather than sort of, hey, your second cousin once removed. He's a great guy for the Basileans. So yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue very well, does it?
No, I think maybe a little bit of artistic license there with that one.
There you go. All right, cool. Well, at least that kind of lays it out. And she is noted as the last in the bloodline as well, from what Naeus has said. So Naeus didn't have any kids. I guess that's something that the law is now established. And it's really from a branch removed. But it's good to kind of lay that out, that it's not a blood... it is a blood relative, but it's a little bit of disconnect there. But it also makes sense in the law when you read it. So when you're reading great uncle, that's a term of affection rather than anything.
Endearment.
100%. Endearment. That's the word I was looking for. Which is good. You know, that happens, and I call some family friends that I grew up with uncle, and he's not really my uncle. That kind of deal. So makes sense. It's a good loophole to work out if you make a mistake in the law. but
you say mistake, I say flavour.
Yeah, we'll call it flavour. I think that works. I think one of the things that I find the most fun about any law is finding a hole and a writer figuring out how that makes sense. And you see it a lot in Star Trek. A good example in Star Trek is Klingons. Back in the 1960s, they didn't have enough money to do the makeup for the ridges on Klingons' heads.
Of course, they were just humans, weren't they, basically?
Exactly.
Right?
So, they were actors, were humans. And what they've done throughout Star Trek lore is kind of hinted that there is a reason why it was there. I think Star Trek Deep Space Nine did a really good bit because they went back in time, and then Worf gets asked, is that's a Klingon? Why has he got, what's gone on? And he's like, oh, it's just a period of shame. We don't talk about it. So they're being very kind of vague about the reasoning why it was there, and I love that. And eventually, I think they do explain it. I think in Enterprise or something, but I love that kind of thing of finding there's a hole in the lore, and for a writer to come around and kind of fill it with something that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it does, and I really like that kind of stuff. So that's why I nitpick this kind of stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, we also find out her mother's name's Celeste. We also know they died at the end of the Abyss. And noted down, it didn't say the year again, but it does say near the end of the Abyss, which was around about 3,854. And that note's actually very important because that comes up again. The end of the Abyss comes up a few times. And actually, I was wondering why, and then I realized a lot of the events that are brought up, Rob actually wrote. And I'm just figuring all that out. The Edge of the Abyss you had a hand in. I think you had a hand in a lot of the short stories that are referenced here, and a lot of things. So you've done a really good job of tying your previous works into it.
Well, I suppose that was one thing. It's I guess you've got to bear in mind that for some people, this will be their jumping off point. They haven't been introduced to Kings of War at all. They don't know any of the Basileans or anything like that. So for them, this is the first contact they'll have. So I think for them, it needs to be, each of those little stories needs to be obvious enough that they kind of understand the character, they understand their motivations, they get a sense of them. And then they're like, oh, I'm interested to read more. Whereas for people like yourself, Dave, there's enough sort of juice in there for them to go, oh, well, wait a minute, this was referenced before, or this is a continuation of a character, or that sort of thing. So I sort of wanted it to be useful for someone just coming into it fresh, and they're like, okay, I understand all this, I understand these people, I get this character, oh, they're interesting, I want to play this champion, as well as sort of, oh, right, okay, oh, I remember taking part in that's a big thing. A lot of people will have played in the Edge of the Abyss campaign or Halpi's Rift and those sort of things. So it's like a nice little sort of reward, I guess, for those people to say, oh, thanks for taking part in that. Now we're sort of so it hasn't just sort of been gone and done. Do you know what I mean? It's still sort of having repercussions today, because I think that was, again, going back to that idea that Bonnie always says the world is changing. Well, even stuff that happened in Edge of the Abyss campaign is still having repercussions today. And I think that's quite a nice thing that you don't often see.
And it's real. It's real. I mean, big events don't just happen. Edge of the Abyss, the more I look into it, the more I do stuff with the wiki. It's probably one of the more significant events in the history of the lore of Pannithor, and the fact that people can't just get over it. I mean, a lot of stuff happened. A lot of people died. A whole land got flooded. That stuff doesn't just, people don't move on that within 5-10 years. It takes a while for that. And especially how, we live in a land of war, and if you're just saying, oh, it's just everyone just builds fixes everything within a year and everyone moves on and doesn't references, that's not real. I mean, I mean, yeah, if you go back to any lore like Lord of the Rings, they still go on about events that happened thousands of years ago. So it's really good, and it helps tie everything together. And especially how a lot of people, I think I've had this commentary a little bit hearing about it, how Champions doesn't really feel towards people that already play Kings of War. I think the lore is a good way of roping some of those people in, because the lore definitely ties in, and it's just like Armada. It all kind of links up. You just have to look for those links. So cool. So another thing is Basilian lions probably live longer than normal lions, because Naeus's lion, Anir, I think it's Kanir.
Nakis? Is it Nakis? Something like that.
I think it's an R at the end, so it's Nakir. Nika. Yeah, whatever. Nike. We'll go Nike. We'll go Nike. All right. So yeah, Nike appears to be a lot older than the 10-year mark that lions normally live for. So I'm suspecting lions kind of live a little bit longer than a normal day-to-day. Not a big lore drop, but it's quite interesting to know the lifespan of animals and so forth. So
assuming it's the same one.
True. It would be a bit weird for him to call his pet the same thing, but all right.
I'm sure there's been plenty of lassies.
True. So maybe he keeps up appearances. And he just every time his lion dies, he just gets another one and just calls it the same thing. That's kind of evil a little bit.
Well, that's the Basileans all over, right? I mean, that's not confirmed, by the way. That's me riffing there.
This is just us having fun. Yeah.
Oh, am I?
Rob, you can't do that. You write this. People will take things seriously. Me, I take things seriously. I write things on the wiki.
Sorry, I won't. I won't make any more jokes anymore. That's it. No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay.
But I did write about the goblin thing that you said on the countercharge thing, how goblins reproduce.
Oh no, that's fact. That is fact. That is 100% canon. Fact. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, but yeah, it's a bit of fun. I mean that would make sense in Basilian culture, as we're finding out they're not entirely on the good spectrum. They do things, and we actually find that in the next story, that they're not exactly all good. So it wouldn't surprise me, and that would be an interesting kind of character thing. Especially how he's revered as this kind of hero.
Yeah. Doesn't want the mask slip.
Yeah, we'll push it. Just start like your next lore writing about him. Just make a little hints that it's actually just a new line every time. That would be great. Cool. So that's pretty much the summary of Alanis. I mean, a lot of people already knew about her. Now, the one thing I have taken a shot at, and this is Rob, you can confirm or deny if this is true. I've got her age about 25. So in the story, it notes her being a young girl when her parents died. So that's around the Edge of the Abyss. So that was about 3,854. So she, you add a few years onto that. So around about the Storm of the Shire, she's about 18 to 23. So now 2 years later, in 2070, she will be about 25. Now, does that sound about right?
That's spot on.
Perfect.
Yeah, that is just sort of early 20s. sort of that was always the idea. Is because what you need again is you need these characters to be able to go on and do stuff, for the next 20, 30 years potentially. You know what I mean? So I think we needed to be a lot of these characters to be a bit younger, and because they haven't been around as for as long as all the other characters. So they'll be on the younger side, most of these people.
Cool. All right, I'm glad I got that because if anyone's writing any lore, put years in your lore. It really helps people like me. Chicken Mark, how do you feel about Alanis? I mean, you've read some of it too, eh?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I really like this character, and I think it's the poster child for champions. It's kind of like the spokeswoman, so to speak, and. The fact that they're younger and stuff like that, to me, kind of points a little bit towards we're targeting a younger audience with, with the game and everything else like that. Get the kids to look towards them, and that really comes to me with one of the later characters, just kind of with some of the cute factor. But I just think she's the big thing, the poster child, the army to be, recruit to Basilea and, run Alanis. That's the way to go. So that's the way I think of it. I think she's got a cool backstory. And Rob, I have to ask, are we getting more story after this? I understand we haven't seen the cards yet. So supposedly there's lore on the back of the cards as well.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of like a paragraph on each one. And yeah, there's a little bit more on there. So there will be, but I mean, for some of the characters, that just tends to be a shorter version, a bit like Dave's Too Long Didn't Read stuff for each character. But then each unit has a little bit of a paragraph as well. So there is more there. After that, I'm not sure.
After that, you're not sure? Okay, yeah. No. I didn't know if there was going to be follow-on or anything like that. And, I've already written... I've already written, like, 15 supplements for you already in expansion packs, so don't worry.
I mean, the whole idea is that these, this, like I said before, this is the starting point for all these characters. This is your introduction to them. A little bit like, I guess, actually, the characters that are introduced again back in Edge of the Abyss. So, like Jarvis, you had Ector. Ector was in that one. And then
there's a character in Champions that you introduced in Edge of the Abyss.
Yes, of course, so exactly, so all of those have been sort of introduced at the point where that's when their story sort of started for the players. So I guess that would be the similar thing for this one. Is I would imagine campaigns, I mean, they'd be great potentially for little adventure, a bit like the Edge of the Abyss ones. They end up having their own Dungeon Saga adventure, that sort of stuff. So I definitely think that this is the start for these, and there might be evolutions for them which could potentially affect their rules as well, that sort of thing. So I think there's a bright future ahead of them. I just, at the minute, Ronnie hasn't told me what I need to do next.
There's a lot of story for threads as well within these lore dumps that should need exploring or will need exploring if we're really gonna, because I mean lore is a good way of people to stay engaged, especially some people don't go to tournaments. I mean as they call the dirty casual is the one that makes a business, as they say. So I mean some people just love just reading lore, like me. I'm not much of a table player. I love the lore though, and I love getting invested in it. And I mean I'm sure I'm not the only one. Hopefully I'm not the only one out there that do as well. So interesting. All right, well, we'll dive into the Bloody Cardinal as well. So obviously the next one is Bloody Cardinal. That's the Force of the Abyss. Now, the Too Long Didn't Read version is that a small town priest who gave a lot of food to the poor is manipulated by an entitled rich kid, and the rich kid wins in the end. That's my Too Long Didn't Read version of that particular story. So for those that eat the rich, that are supportive of Eat the Rich, it's not going to be a story for you. The summary of it, that Aldous, that's how, again, I butchered the names. How did you have it in your head, Rob?
Oh, his Alustus
Cassius. That's it. Alistus Cassius. He was a small town priest who basically was really good at being a small town priest. He gave to the poor. He was popular. He rose in the ranks and became really popular. And then the head of all the churches in Basilea, they kind of needed to look a little bit better because of all the high taxes they've been giving on the poor to support the war. So this is when I'm talking about how Basileans aren't always on the side of good. They have that society problem of sometimes taking advantage of the poor and also need to save face. So they actually promote him to being the head bishop of the Church of the Righteous Domavar. For those that don't remember, that he's actually a half Shining One, and the son of that the leader of the Shining Ones, and I can't remember his name at the moment, and I'm blanking on it. It's I can't remember.
Not Oscan.
Not Oscan. He's the evil one. What's the good one? Good one.
Not Garkan. I can only remember bad ones.
You can only remember bad one. That just shows you how not part of society they are. It is. I need to do it, otherwise it's going to drive me mentally crazy. Mesicator, Messeator. He's basically the leader of the Celestians. Mesicator. Miscata, whatever. The leader of the Shining Ones. He's the son of it, and he's more famously known as the one that bit Oscan with his own axe and created the abyss when he slammed it onto the ground in year 0. So he became the head bishop of that. Now it is noted it being a cathedral. Now historically for Basileans, they normally refer to them as temples. So I'm guessing that's more on the typo side of it. That cathedral and the temple the same thing. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that, again, trying to make it as easy as possible for understanding if they're coming in fresh. A cathedral's a bit. People immediately know what a cathedral is, whereas if you start to have to explain temples and all that. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're...
It's not a big deal. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. It's, it's, for you, Dave, it's a temple. For anyone coming to this fresh, it's a cathedral.
Yeah.
So they understand what it is.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really if you're also looking at the Golden Horn map, it's referred to the temple district as well. So that's why you don't see a cathedral district or quarter, I should say, temple quarter. And I actually found out, I didn't know this because I'm not religious myself, that cathedral was actually specifically for Christianity. It's most of the time it's called a temple for other religions. I didn't know that. It's actually specifically for that.
So you will find some, obviously the Cardinal. That's a religious one. The cathedral, actually some of the units as well. Again, that's because it is slightly easier. People understand it. The references are, for that one, it's meant to be, there's like the slithering bishop, for example, who's the Nagari, and that sort of thing. So it was, again, just making sure that it was something that people could easily understand if this is their first entry into the world before having to learn more a bit about the lore. So yeah, there are some religious iconography that's more, Christian based. Yeah, I think so. I think rather than sort of having to go, because
again, that's me just nitpicking. That's me being a dick. So
it's fine.
The dick side I was talking about.
No, if this, this is absolutely fine. And I think this will be again, if depending upon where you're coming from, where this is in your Kings of War journey, then I think it's making it as easy as possible for understand, or then for people like you, Dave, just making you angry. So
I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Oh yeah, that's what. Hey, you sound like my school teachers now. So
yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah, this is fine. So there's a couple of things, but yeah, I think that's the main reason for it. I think it's ease of understanding. I think for newcomers.
Yeah. So one of the same, if you look at if you go back in the lore and you see that, and especially in Mark Barber's books, I think that he mentions, in the second chapter, he mentions of the 27 Shining One temples, great temples that have been built in the temple quarter, all the remaining Shining Ones each have its own huge temple that the Basileans bow to. So this is why this one's a little bit on the more controversy side for a lore buff like myself, because He Domovator didn't actually isn't one of original Shining ones that survived. He's actually a half-blood. So, it makes sense him having a temple. Where it's actually located, I would say, because it's not stated in the law where exactly it's located, it's noted as being in the heart of the city. So, looking on the map of Goldenhorn, and obviously, Rob, you can say whatever you want to this, but looking at the map of the Goldenhorn, because there's a big kind of river in the middle, the heart can be disputed. So you could say the heart of Basilean society is their religion. So maybe it should be in the temple quarter, but that doesn't really make sense because this church is noted as one of the big ones. So is it in the royal quarter, which makes sense in terms of what's already been established in the law, but then would you refer to that as the heart of the city? So where you place it, I'm not sure. But also the Mark Barber's novel was actually written based off the year, I think 3865. So it's actually 5 years before these events. So you could argue that they just built more temples. So.
No, I think heart of the city is one of those interesting things, Dave. Is obviously when you're sort of writing these things, you don't necessarily think that people are going to look at the geography. I mean, I was thinking it was more like in the sort of, this is a guy that's been sent to sort of help the people. So whether or not, I don't know, I must admit, whether there's churches in the sort of general sort of living districts, that's where he would go to kind of, because it does talk about a lot of people queuing outside for his sermons and that sort of stuff. I guess I sort of imagined him that this would be not necessarily like on the edge of the, but towards if there's like the equivalent of like the slums, and so because there was something else that I wrote that hasn't been. So this is sort of like maybe where the poorer district is, the heart of the city there. Obviously, you could take it the way you mean it, but
correct, yeah.
That he is sort of in the bustling sort of area of it. That's what I mean, sort of the heart, the sort of bustling, the sort of like where a lot of the people are, where he is going to attract the most people to his sermons, where he's going to potentially do the most good as well. They brought him in for a reason, which initially was to sort everyone out. And, he talks about initially his church is run down, but obviously when he gets promoted to the cathedral, it's all a bit different. So, I think, and the Domovar thing as well, that might be another reason. It's not one of the special temples. This is like one of the ones a little bit on the outskirts. This is the one that's sort of, it does still have a lot of religious significance, but it's not sort of, I've always imagined Basilean, I've always imagined Basilean culture to be very much the haves and the have-nots. And one, I don't know if, Mark, I think I did send you some of the text for the other book that I was writing after after Ascent of the Goblin King, and I always
the Ratkin one.
Yeah, a rat's tail, and in that it's very much that is very much the haves and the have-nots. There's a very different underbelly of Basilea. So I sort of always imagined that Sallustis would be in that area. He would be amongst the market traders, the sort of, the street cleaners, those kind of the common folk. Whereas I always thought like the temples would be where all the rich, the elites of sort of Basilea would be. And I can't imagine they would be rubbing shoulders personally with, the sort of lower classes maybe. But I think that's the way I imagined it. And I think
it works.
Yeah, I think that's the way I came into it anyway. That this is he was always meant to be a person of the people, and then he had a furthest to fall, from that sort of high post.
And I like that. I like that idea, and especially, but it also does establish that outside of the Shining Ones, we possibly may be seeing, people honoring other, demigods and other gods like that. So it's quite interesting. It opens the door. The Basilean culture, it could be have a lot more layers than we initially. So you could have the 20, I think it's 27 or 23. I can't remember how many there are at the moment. But we could have the Shining Ones at the top of the hierarchy, and then below that, the lower bishops. They look after all those demigod churches, and you could actually start to see that kind of hierarchy. When you look at Basilean society, and I find that fascinating. Like that's a really cool storytelling element, especially how when we look into corruption, like we do in this story, of how that can go wrong. And we'll finish off his story. So basically, there was a rich kid with really bad hands. His name was Jeremiah Constance. He missed out on that top job that Aldous actually got. And he basically came up with a plan to basically manipulate him and make him corrupt. So he kind of, told him to steal money so he could upgrade his house, stole food, and pretty much just made him this really obese and gluttonous creature, you could say, of a human. And eventually that caught up with him, and then the forces, someone from the Abyss came to him, whispered some sweet nothings into his ear, and made a deal of immortality. And essentially when he passed away, he ended up, well, I think he passed away. The Abyss has always never really felt like an underworld for me. It's just another realm that's kind of got underworld-esque kind of races there, but ultimately he becomes probably more of a lower abyssal, but he obviously became what we know now as the Bloody Cardinal. So it looks like the rich kid ended up getting what he wanted and is now the head of the church, because it doesn't actually elaborate on that. I'm assuming so, because he was his assistant. So the rich kid wins in the end. So no one wins in this story. It's just everyone loses.
One interesting thing actually about that is that I did speak to, when this story was sent about Matt and about his soul, this idea of his soul going to the abyss, because that's never, like you said, that's never necessarily been described. But we did want, it wasn't that he sinned and then was immediately taken to the abyss. It wasn't like him going straight to hell. It was basically that, a wicked one sort of, like I said, whispered in his ear and said, well, look, we can help you out here, just come to us and we'll give you all the life you want. So it's more sort of like that, rather than sort of like sinning and then going to hell and that sort of idea. So it was an interesting one, that one. To Matt Gilbert sort of said, oh well, let's do it like this way. So that was a good suggestion from Matt, I think.
Yeah, I mean, now there's, I guess, two ways established in canon. They could actually just journey into the abyss, which there is a way to do that. Or they could, their soul. So the soul must be some kind of entity. I mean, we live in a world of magic. It makes sense. So it's interesting to see how that would work. But I'm guessing not every soul would kind of go down to the abyss. So there have to be some kind of binding magic from the abyss for that particular entity's soul or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, they could use some kind of portal stone type of energy or something like that. The abyss like zips in and out of all sorts of places. So, that's the kind of way I thought about it. They just came and got it.
Ghostbusters trap. No, it's just a Ghostbusters trap. They just throw it down and it just whoops, and then they take it to the abyss. Mark, what's your thoughts on the Bloody Cardinal?
I really enjoyed the story, and you pretty much encapsulated it. So, it's more of, it's so good. Basilea is so good, it's bad. So, he, he took the dark path and he ended up in the dark place. So and they just came and got him, and now he's rampaging around, with the imps carrying him around, just waiting for the crumbs that are falling from his mouth, so to speak. So, I thought he's a really neat character, so I'm looking forward to playing him.
It's interesting. Sorry, Mark, you mentioned that, that's so good they're bad is, I guess, a bit of a trope for the Basileans. So I guess I wanted to do someone who was just so bad he's bad. Do you know what I mean? He's just like, it's not, yes, he got sort of twisted. It wasn't that he wasn't doing good things, like maybe torturing people or killing people. He was just doing, eventually, just bad stuff because he enjoyed it. I think that was one of the things for this one. It was sort of, he's out and out, he becomes out and out bad. And I think there's, I might have even taken a little bit from Hamlet, talking about how those who soar closest to sort of heaven have the furthest to fall. That's the sort of idea for this one, is that he was just tempted and he just sort of couldn't, he'd had a very pious sort of life, and as soon as he sort of saw an opportunity for an excess, and he was like, I like this is cool. So maybe
you see it so much. You see it so much in Fame as well. I mean, of people coming up from rough upbringings, and then money and fame and everything, power corrupts them. And I see this as more of a sad story. At the end of the day, it was just a guy who wanted to help, and he helped a lot of people, and just one person's intentions just corrupted him. And it's a rather sad one when you think about it. So anyway,
he's a sad character.
Yeah, he is.
He failed the ultimate test.
Nah,
exactly. And things have consequences, so oh well. Anyway, we'll move on to something more happier, and we'll talk about goblins, because that's Rob's favourite one, and there's a lot of references to his old works in this one, which is really cool to see. So this is Grunk Blackclaw, and the too long didn't read version is a goblin steals a steel juggernaut and then shoots puppies out of it. That's pretty much all you need to know about this particular character. So Grunk's clan, who is led by Gristle, who is actually a character from Wing and a Prayer, which is a short story that Rob has done, which is, as the links are all available of these short stories on the wiki as well, which you can look it up and read yourself. So basically they were pushed out of their cabins by some underminers, and for those that don't remember, underminers are some pale subspecies of goblin that we saw in Ascent of the Goblin King, also written by Rob, and then pushed into a dwarven mine. Eventually, they come across the aftermath of a battle, which appears to be between some abyssal dwarfs and some dwarfs, and eventually, because they live in these mines, Grunk eventually sets a trap, kills some dwarfs, and is able to get a steel juggernaut suit, basically, and then he's able to adapt that to a point where he's shooting out more beasts from his cannons that he has there. So it's just a variation on a steel juggernaut. It's also with a few facts that we actually learned from this is Grunk is a member of Gristle's clan, but Gristle wasn't actually the leader of the clan in the short story that Rob, that was actually King Grony, and King Grony sent Gristle to actually obtain the jetpack, which you can actually play King Grony on the table in 3rd edition at the moment as, I think, the King model. I think it's as an upgrade for the King model. So it's interesting to see now that she is now the leader, and it's really unknown what happens to Grony, but it could be just a case of just like your Goblin Society, them just splintering off, or Grony could ultimately have blown up because he was riding a jetpack. Other notes there.
I mean, it's the former. I would think she is split off. You know, Goblin Society is very, very fickle. So one minute you're sort of, you know, you're the sort of number one person, and then the next, you know, you're sort of yesterday's news or yesterday's meal. So she's kind of split off and done her own thing. Grony is still very much alive.
Oh, there you go. There's the confirmation. That's awesome. So, and also it was vague at the end of Wing of the Prayer whether Gristle survived. You assume that because Grony got the actual jetpack, but it still was a bit vague. So it's cool to see a returning character in the lore that's not actually a character that's played on the table, and I really like that stuff. It also mentions goblins with a weird pale skin. Is it right to say that those are the Underminers?
Yep. Yeah. That was just a little nod. Again,
for it's a good nod.
Someone who's read it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a good indication because at the Ascent in the Goblin King, actually all the Underminers kind of went with Grogger as well, and then Grogger actually lost during the Edge of the Abyss. I think it was the Clash of Kings 2018 book. It mentions Grogger running out of the forest after essentially being defeated after all the forces of nature came back.
Defeat is a strong word there, Dave. I'd say tactical retreat.
Tactical retreat, just the Goblin way, yes.
Yeah,
right. A tactical retreat, but it also shows that whether the Underminers that we saw either weren't all the Underminers or the Underminers have survived. Either way, that subspecies still exists in the world of Pannithor, which is cool to see because I love that kind of variation on the typical goblins that we see in other fantasy, and which is why, you know, the whole Riftwood orcs and orcs thing I really like, the fact that these are two different types of orcs and we never really see that in lore. We only ever see one type in a fantasy world. So this is a nice cool variation on goblins, which I hope is definitely explored a little bit more. And it's because of that short story, the Wing on the Prairie short story, that's why I've set the timeline around about 3,870, because of that Wing on the Prairie short story mentions equipment and mentions them locking away. I think it even mentions the orc, so the Riftforged orcs invading the Shires, but it definitely was after the Broken Alliance book, which takes place in 3,866. So I that's why I placed it around about 4 years later, and why I've kind of, this, in my head, this is anyway where this all takes place, because it all kind of lines up nicely there.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking that mentioning that Grunk is sort of a nod to Leo the Iron Goblin.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I always hated Leo the Iron Goblin. The description of him, I always thought it was a bit daft. But I think then we did Bolts in Dead Zone, and I just sort of realised how much I love goblins in massive suits of armor. So I was like, well, this is sort of a chance. It's sort of like, not only is it a nod to Leo the Iron Goblin, but this is sort of like fantasy bolts in some ways as well. So I thought of.
Did you
again,
write Leo?
No, I didn't. No, I think Leo was first edition.
Yeah, it was. It was with the Kings and Legends supplement.
That's right, and I just thought the way it was, I can't remember the top of my head, but I just thought, first of all, the fact he was called Leo, I just was like, why is a goblin called Leo? I think I was immediately annoyed. But but actually I thought, well, I sort of think it would be funny to put a goblin in a big suit. So we're back full circle.
Yeah, I like it, and yeah, if anyone wants to read about Leo and the Iron Goblin, again, it's on the wiki. It's an interesting read. It is before a time where really certain things were established in the world and so forth. Basically, Leo was a slave, and he managed to break out from the Abyssal Dwarfs and steal a big giant robot. So he was called Leo and the Iron Goblin. So you definitely feel that here. So it's a good little nod, and I think this if you could say this is version 2.0 of Leo, I think this is definitely a more grounded and more in lore kind of story, I think, in my gut. I'll throw it to you, Mark. What's your feelings on the Goblin story?
Well, I really liked it, and now I want to build a cave goblin army. So I've got a bunch of first edition goblins, and so my biggest question to Rob is, what color is pale? So
yeah, what's your definition?
I got to get my realistic color here for this, but I've got all those first edition goblins. I'm ready to rock.
Oh, I mean, I'd say really sort of very, very pale green, like vomit green, sort of. Very sort of. Yeah, that was the whole idea. Is obviously they've been under the ground because they don't come out. That was the whole idea. They've sort of been underground for so long. They occasionally sort of come out, or they're eating worms all the time. So yeah, you imagine it's a bit like sort of when you see fish have been under there. So they start green, but then because they never see the sunlight, they never go any darker.
Interesting. Oh, okay. I really like Underminers.
Yeah, I thought the Underminers, in my mind, this is why I wanted to ask the question, were like a cream color or something like that, kind of like pinky,
no, very still very, very pale, very, very pale green, almost white, but still with the hint. In painting, it would probably have like a very nice name, like early mist or something like that. So yeah. You imagine that color.
Here's a challenge for anyone listening. What's your interpretation of an Underminer? And flick us a image of it, and we'll post it on our socials. Because I'm interested in what people's interpretation of it, because I really want to see these on the table.
So do I. They gotten a lot of press now, so to me they're a thing. It's like free dwarfs, imperial dwarfs, right? Orcs, right? So
everything is canon.
We got the Underminers, and they are canon, so they got to be out there somewhere.
Exactly. All right. Well, we'll leave goblins alone, and we'll move on to the first one that we've kind of that isn't revealed by the first releases of Champions, which is the Halflings. So we've got Taran, Bligh, which me and Mark were actually wrong about, because we thought they were actually going to be that was going to be the Trident round one. Which it's interesting that this is a Halfling character. So the too long didn't read version of the story is the kid from Iron Man 3. Tries to make an iron beast, but instead he makes an iron go-kart. That's pretty much the too long didn't read version of that. So the story basically it works like on journal form. So you see several different days of him talking about building this iron behemoth, as he called it. So Taran Bligh is a halfling who wanted to invent something to defend the Shires, and there's hints towards goblins attacking and some greenskins and so forth. So he decides to make an iron behemoth, which sounds like a combination of the name Steel Behemoth, which is the dwarven big robot, and the Iron Beast, which is the halfling conversion of the Steel Behemoth. So after having his machines taken off him by the council because he was causing a bit of chaos and his neighbors got a little bit upset with him, he eventually converts his little project of the Iron Behemoth into what they call a wheeled iron crusher. So that's why we've got a wheeled contraption, as you can see in the model in the book. And so we get a few references, not a lot of new stuff in this particular one. We do get confirmation that Holdenberg, Forest of Cane, Furchester, Pixbury, which is the home of Aaron Cadwater, as everyone remembers from, not everyone, people remember from Broken Alliance, and the bogs are all mentioned. So it looks like they all have been rebuilt and reestablished after the war with the Reforged Orcs, because they essentially the Shires got pretty wrecked during that. Iron Beasts appear to be a little bit more commonly used. I mean, we saw the first real big usage of them in the Broken Alliance, but it looks like they are being used a lot more in the military. And there's a few new characters. So we've got John Mussing and Mary Mussing, a couple of farmers, but we also get references to Paddy Bowman, Bohurt, Bobert, which is actually from Broken Alliance. There's a little bit more on him. Sadly, he passes away in that book. And also the Iron Beast inventor, Arbuckle, Percival Arbuckle, which is the inventor of the Iron Beast, who converted the steel behemoth over to the Iron Beast. And that's about it. I don't really have too much meat there. Rob, did you want to give your input on that one?
Yeah, so I sort of so this one was mainly doing the diary entries, so it was a little bit of a sort of a break. I didn't want everyone just reading reams and reams of text all the time. There's sort of more about Taran as well in the sort of fluff for his cards as well.
Okay.
I won't necessarily spoil all that, but it's basically that he is a bit of sort of a hapless inventor, I think. He sort of has got delusions of grandeur. He sort of wants to be, imagining he's saving the Shires and all stuff like that. He kind of sets off on this adventure thinking that people are kind of following him because, he's got all these amazing inventions, but actually it's because they're being paid and he doesn't realise. So I think he's
a bit naive, yeah.
Yes, he's being set up, I think, for an interest. He can either go two ways. It's a bit like, and again, a bit of a literary reference is, if anyone's read Thomas Hardy's Return of the Native, you've got a character in there called Clem Yoberite, and it was one of the things they say about him is he would either succeed spectacularly or fail spectacularly. And I think that's Taran as well, that he has got an opportunity to do great things, or he could fail quite spectacularly. There's also some interesting notes in his inventions. There is a film reference in those, actually, just to amuse me, and it'll be interesting if anyone can pick up on what those inventions are loosely referring to.
Oh, I missed
a little
that
game,
one.
a little game for everyone. I can't remember if it's in the actual text or if it's on the back of his card. Let me just have a look. I've got the text in front of me.
I feel like it's not in the text.
No, it's on the back of his card.
Back up. Okay, there's a challenge for everybody. But yeah, interesting. I like it. I think it's a nice, clean story as well. Especially, it feels very, very in line with Halflings. And it's good to know they're about, because one of the positives that we are seeing with all these champions, it's pretty safe to assume if they're in champions, they most likely will be in 4th edition. So this kind of does confirm also what we might see in the future. I'd be very surprised if they're not, because it will kind of be like, oh, I really like Halflings, then you move to Kings of War, they're not there, and I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. So that's our interpretation of why we think if it's included here, it'll probably be in Kings of War. So it's good to see the Halflings survived into 4th edition. Cool. I don't really have much more than that. Mark, do you have your 2 cents on that one?
Yes. You got to have a least favorite model, and this is my least favorite model, I guess, of the group.
Aww.
So, yeah, sorry. Sorry, Halfling fans.
Again, Laura, these things that everyone has different likes and dislikes, and some people like things more than others, so it makes sense. Can't please everybody, and that's the point of the hobby. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And then, Rob, you mentioned that you did the journal entries, and this was the first one of them, and it was really pretty cool. I wasn't expecting it when I was reading, and it came up, and I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. It's kind of like a story within a story, sort of. So, and you mentioned that you just did that to just kind of break it up a little bit, so you're just not reading blocks of text.
Pretty much, yeah. You've got to think of different ways to present the stories, I suppose, to people. It's like, just to keep them engaged. At this point, they've already done 3 pretty dense little stories. There's a lot to digest in these stories. It's a lot to try and cram in not a lot of words, really. So it's like, okay, well, how to tell that story in a different way. And also, what's useful from Taran's point of view is to get a sense of his character, that this sort of hopeless optimist that he thinks he can do all this stuff. So that's probably a better way to do it, through these sort of little journal entries, than it would be through just, me describing, oh, Taran was an inventor and his inventions didn't go very well, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, a little bit of a freshen up of the sort of idea, really.
Yeah, I like it. It was a good sweet story. I like it. All right, we'll move on to the Voidtalon now. So that's the Nightstalker. So my too long didn't read version of it. It's a freak bird who's basically a freak bird. It's pretty much all you need to know about the story. So it takes the perspective of a diary, or a last note, you could say, written of Britta Bicken. Britta Bicken. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yep.
Bicken, that's it. And they were patrolling around a newly taken Blackridge, because in the newspaper articles that were released on the social media, it actually notes that Blackridge was still held by orcs, but this kind of implies that they actually were able to kick the orcs out and actually take back their Blackridge. So that's an interesting little bit of note, because Blackridge had been held by orcs for a time in the lore anyway. It's not very common, that particular note.
I must admit, I didn't write those newspapers, so I didn't see them.
Yeah. But historically, Blackridge is noted as being orc held, so this is a good way of showing some of the progression of the lore, especially how a lot of the possibly future of champions takes place up north. They eventually come across the Voidtalon and was attacked. They ran and hid, and the last entry is basically them hiding. So that's all you really need to know. Obviously, always read the stories yourself. This is just my quick interpretation, so we can get through it, because otherwise this will be a very, very long episode. Cool. So some new facts that we mentioned. It kind of implies in some of the fluff that the Abyss actually caused the Nightstalkers to actually emerge. I don't know how well established that is, but it kind of implies after the axe was thrown down, the Abyss actually opened up, that also caused a rift in the void for the Nightstalkers. So basically the barrier between the void and the mortal realms kind of fading a little bit. I can't remember whether that's been mentioned in the past. It's just something I noted, and that I might actually look into the lore later on to see if there's a little bit more meat to it, but that could be a new thing.
That text is existing text. So those intros.
Oh, okay, never mind. There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, that was just me. No, I might have just never clicked before, but that's just my bad. And also the Voidtalon appears to be a Nightstalker Frostclaw. So a lot of Nightstalker creatures are sometimes just like a venom kind of taken over kind of this particular creature and then becomes it. Looks like the Voidtalon, their non-corrupted equivalent is a Frostclaw, which is a massive eagle, which makes sense. It looks very, very much very similar to that. That's about all I got there. I'm assuming Britta is dead, but who knows? You never know. They could have written that and survived. So that's pretty much it.
A couple of things if you want them, Dave. For that one, is Bretta is actually the same Bretta from the Icy Void short story.
Oh yes, you're right. I missed that one.
Yeah, so I thought that was again just sort of those nice little nods to stuff. If people have read it, like you, Dave, they'll be like, oh, okay, that's Bretta. It doesn't confirm whether she survives or not. One thing about the actual sort of design process for the Voidtalon that was quite interesting was originally, instead of those creepy kind of hands as feet, I'd proposed tentacles, but it was actually Juan, the concept artist, who sent back a version with those hands, and it was like, yes, 100% it needs to have these creepy claws. So that's quite an example when, because what Juan was sent for all of this, all of the designs, was all the sort of background for each character, so he could sort of incorporate that in some way. And then one of the things he added to that one was the hands, and I thought they were so creepy that we just had to include them.
And so for those that want to read the short story, it's called An Icy Void, and it is still available on Mantic's website. I'll put a link in the wiki as well if anyone's interested.
There you go.
Cool.
And those hands are creepy, and this is my second favorite model of the release. So really, really looking forward to collecting this particular company. And, the background is really cool, and I think the Frostclaws are crows or ravens, I think, something like that.
Ravens.
So,
They're ravens.
Ravens, yeah. Right. So, but very, very cool. I really like this model a lot. The head looks like a soul flayer and everything. And I don't know. This one is definitely going to end up on my tabletop.
All right, so next we'll go into the Northern Alliance character who happens to be a dwarf called Jorden Talensen. Now, this is the one that had a little bit of a twist to it, so I'm going to put everyone out there as a spoiler, okay? Everyone needs to be aware that it's a spoiler. I don't want to hear anyone complaining, and if you do complain, then really it's on you at this point. So basically, the too long didn't read version is that a free dwarf joins the dwarfs and then joins the Northern Alliance, but is actually an abyssal dwarf. That's pretty much all you need to know. So there's a lot of moving to different factions, and it's quite interesting. This is what one of the references I was meaning about how there's more story in the future to come, and about the secret and so forth in the north. So basically, Jorden Talensen was pushed out of the Harpy Mountains during the Edge of the Abyss. All the free dwarfs were actually kicked out, and he chilled out with the dwarfs. And as we've seen in Honor's Price, the free dwarfs were quite mistreated, quite taken advantage of. Some of them were forced into military. Some, in Jordan's case, was forced for labor. But eventually, Harpy's Rift happened, and the dwarfs ventured back into Harpy's Rift. And in this case, Jorden actually volunteered as part of a contingent of free dwarfs heading into the Harpy Mountains. Now, during that particular battle, they joined up with the Northern Alliance, and Jorden heard about a secret that Taran, who is the leader, he's an ice elf who's chilling out up north, and he's the leader of the Northern Alliance. They'll refer to a secret that he was hiding. So after the war happened, Jorden actually decided to sign up with the Northern Alliance. He actually moved up to chill. It was a bit of a cold reception, to put the pun in there, as you did do in the story there. So he chilled out, he built some armor, he built a robot, Frostclaw, which is the robot bird that you see there, with the goal of obtaining an audience with Taran, because it's revealed he's actually an abyssal dwarf ironcaster, and he wants to take the secret, or whatever he finds, back to Taragar, and presumably to become high ranking, similar to what happens in Honor's Price, where they want to go back there and earn a little bit more credit with their wicked ones, and basically become high ranking and obtain more power within Abyssal Dwarf society. So this one is a very interesting one to discuss. So there's a lot to it, but we're running a little bit. This episode will be like hours and hours long if we went into the nuts and bolts here. So we're going to just touch on some of the things here. So the time period for this is obviously after the Harpy's Wrist helped us also place where Champions lies. Jorden was actually at the Battle of Rindefas, is that last stand before they cut off the chainway, when the free dwarfs were actually retreating. We know a lot of other characters, such as the ones that were in Honor's Price and Pride of the King, they were at that same battle. It's actually the first canon mention that we get of Goluk's Fury, and that's that steel behemoth that he has custom made for himself. So we actually don't have an in-game or in-story reference for that machine. So we don't actually know if that machine still existed or not. So this is actually a good indication that it actually still does. And so it means it exists post 3854. So probably in modern day, we're still seeing it rocking around. There's also reference to how free dwarfs were treated, which is that is mentioned quite often in Honor's Price and in Pride of the King. And also about the secret. So the secret up north. And I'm saying secret because we don't know what it is. It's just referred to as a secret. There we go. That was all the new facts. Now, before I go into... Oh, no, I don't even think I will touch on for the thing I pointed out, because we've talked about it a little bit. But, Rob, what's your 2 cents on your creation here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I sort of liked... Well, obviously, I wanted to sort of... Again, you've got a short space to tell a story, so I thought it'd be quite cool to do one that's a little bit of a twist in it. You know, like, you kind of... hopefully feeling a bit sorry for Jorden. You're like, wow, this guy sounds pretty nice. He sounds pretty chilled out. He's sort of helping do this, and then obviously all the time he's actually got a much darker secret, which I think it was something I always wanted to explore with Jarvis, that character, but that never really sort of panned out. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity because, yes, he's an abyssal dwarf. He is potentially a nasty guy, but who knows? You know, it could come to a point where he's got a fork in the road and needs to decide. You know, it would be quite interesting to see if he does, whether an abyssal dwarf goes the other way, whether something happens and turns him good. So I wanted to set this character up and see what it did, and also that idea that, yeah, again, nodding back to events that happened in Edge of the Abyss. It also has events that happened in Halpi's Rift, and sort of now you're sort of up to sort of modern times as well. So yeah, I think, but I definitely think, my idea is that 100% I think spies would be working within the Free Dwarfs and the Imperial Dwarfs. And it's just the fact that this was his opportunity to sort of actually get really sort of heavily embedded, to go behind enemy lines, so to speak, into the Imperial Dwarfs. He sensed an opportunity, was like, when all the chaos, he could go into the camps and do that. And he's got an opportunity to find out. Initially, he was quite pleased to be finding out exactly what was going on with the Imperial Dwarfs and finding all their weapons, and obviously keen to take those back and sort of abuse those and use those as bargaining chips when he got back to like Traegar. But he's obviously sensed that there's something else that could get him even more power, but ultimately that could lead to him to having a choice at some point about what he wants to do and where he wants to go.
It's an interesting character. It's actually definitely a character that could be explored more. So his abyssal name is Kazal Kran. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now, I'm not going to go into a few questions that I have, like why did he help the forces of good during the Edge of the Abyss, and not Edge of the Abyss, so the Harpy's Rift and all that. There's a big discussion we could have about that, but I'm going to skip over that for now because I didn't want to think
one
about
thing I will say. I think what he will say is that he would do whatever it takes. Ultimately self-preservation for abyssal dwarfs is pretty important. I think as well there were lots of battles going on in the you had battles against Rat King, you had battles against Goblins, all that was going on at the times of Halpi's Rift. I don't think anyone particularly likes what's his face, the main guy who triggered off the Halpi's Rift.
Dravak
Dalkin. Dravak. Yeah, no one likes Dravak, so I guess he might have initially thought, well, he's got a good chance to get one over on Dravak as well. So I think definitely lots of ulterior motives, and I think it's, he was there sort of like fixing weapons and all that sort of stuff. I don't imagine him sort of getting his hands too dirty, if that makes sense. So, I think he would. So
no abyssal on abyssal violence.
No, there are special OnlyFans channels for abyssal on abyssal violence, but that I haven't come across those.
Oh god. Yeah, oh god, that would be an interesting. Anyway, Mark, what's your feelings on that before we move on? Because we want to start to speed run a little bit for a few of these, otherwise Rob will be here forever.
Absolutely. I think the mechanical bird is cool, and I think it's like, after, and I can't spoil some of the novels, but now I'm starting to wonder if there are any dwarfs that are actually dwarfs and not secret abyssal dwarfs. So, we've got abyssal dwarfs, free dwarfs, imperial dwarfs, and So, but that was my real takeaway from it. It's like, oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the
Read
one thing
Pride
is,
of the King.
Read Pride of the King. And then the other thing that was interesting too is everybody's trying to figure out this secret in Chill, and I understand that Chris accidentally found it out in one of our episodes because he read it at the end of, I want to say, Fall of the Celestians, and I can't find that episode and I can't find that thing. Not that I've looked that hard, okay? I guess if I wanted to dedicate some time, I could find it. But evidently, it's in that book, and you have to kind of figure it out, I guess. But somewhere along the line,
all right, we'll skip on from that.
I think so. There's your little hint, and it's also a way for you to read Fall of the Celestians. So, and I don't remember seeing it in Fall of the Celestians, so I got to go back and reread it. So,
all right, cool. All right, that's an interesting little tidbit there, Mark. So I have to dive into whether it does point to that. I always thought it was winter, so we'll dive into that at a later date. So we'll move on to another one that was a little bit of a mystery, and that's you're gonna have to help me with this pronunciation, Rob.
Arokamorra.
Arokamorra.
Arokamorra, yeah.
Arokamorra. So she is a female ogre, and one thing I will give you a compliment, Rob, is that there is some good female characters in this, and I think that is something that I think Kings of War, just Pannithor in general, are missing some really good, strong female characters because it is a very male dominated kind of field, and to be honest, I know a lot of female gamers that do get a little bit put off the fact that there's not really a lot of stuff like that. So really good that you threw it in there. So
Thanks,
yeah,
Dave. I was going to say quickly, that's something I tried to do even in the Scent of the Goblin King. You had, Captain Ferner, quite a strong female, although flawed character. But yeah, again, it's important. Again, we want these characters 100%. To appeal to lots of people. So why limit it to a load of white dudes with beards or whatever? Yeah.
Exactly, and we're living in a time where the hobby needs to be accessible as many people as possible. And Kings of War, it's one of those examples that you can actually build a game that's accessible and open to whatever you want. You can build the army that you want, and so if you want to build the army of that is themed to a My Little Pony, you can do that. You can, I mean, that's a little bit stereotypical right there, but I was just making an example of what's bright and colourful. That isn't supposed to be a gender thing, but it's just the idea is that you can build what you want, and one of the entry points is seeing lore characters that you can connect with. So I'm really happy you did that, and I hope we see more of it. I really do. Anyway, the too long didn't read version.
Just a quick side note, Dave. I actually have Alessio's My Little Pony army in the house here. So
oh, there you go. There you go. But I mean, I don't want to say My Little Pony was targeted towards a gender. That was just more of a case of what was bright and colourful and that people can use. Anyway, trying to save face here. Anyway, so we'll do the too long didn't read version of her story. So basically, she is an ogre who is still pissed that another ogre had flooded her house 15 years ago and saved the world. That's basically her story. So she is a bit pissed off at Gomorok. How do you say that? Go. Oh,
sorry.
Grunk is what I say.
Grogagamok and No Magarok.
That's it. So Arokamorra is the leader of a group of ogres who were basically disgruntled of the humans moving to the land. So after the flooding of the Abyss, so the Edge of the Abyss kind of ended with the Green Lady in the Trident realm essentially melting the frozen sea up north, flooding the Abyss, but that also flooded all the homelands of the ogres as well and wiped out a lot of their homeland and became a little bit unlivable for a good period of time, but just pushed them out. And so she still holds a grudge about 15 years. There's a bit of a story there about her experience during that time. And she basically sees him now as what they call the Great Traitor. And it seems like a lot of people in ogre culture see him as the Great Traitor, even though he is on the Elder Council, which is interesting because, how much power the Elder Council has to a race that is typically very nomadic and very kind of like don't have a form of structure of government. It's quite interesting to see him still having quite a big say in ogre culture, even though he is also seen as a bit of a traitor, or at least to her beliefs. Now, a lot of humans have actually moved into ogre lands since the Edge of the Abyss, since that flooding, and it looks like the ogre lands are being refounded or re-inhabited, but also not just by ogres, and it looks like a lot of humans are moving into those lands, and so she was about to attack a camp of humans that she spotted as she had some anger towards this encroachment essentially into her lands. So to go through a few facts, so Arokamorra was about a child when the flooding of the Abyss happened, so that would have been in 3854. So she would be around about her 20s or 30s about now. It's not really specified how old she was, but she was young. So I would say she's about her 20s or 30s. Nomagarok is now on the Elder Council, as we said, and alive after the events of Harpy's Rift. It was all confirmed. But he is known as
it's Grogagamok. Oh, no, sorry. So it is Nemagorok. Sorry, not Gregormok. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up.
Yeah,
I'm getting mixed up now. Yeah.
Yeah, Grogremak is the warrior. He's
That's
the
right.
leader of the
And
Grand
Nemagorok.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
is his best mate. Yeah. He's the mage and stuff. So yeah, he's known as the Great Trader after the flooding appears. Now, whether he's known that for everyone, I suspect not, because he is on the Elder Council for that reason. But there is obviously some animosity there, even though he kind of saved the world. Some people don't really see it that way because of the loss that ogres had. Probably more specifically, ogres don't see him in that positive light. So yeah, humans are now building settlements on the ogre lands, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is the first time we've really known what's happened to that particular location since the flooding. She has a dog, a croc dog called Snapper, which is a good old classic name for a croc dog. And then there's also a young ogre warrior with him called Garomok. Ah, God.
I just like to make these
What
names
are these
as complicated
names
as
based
possible.
off? What are ogre names
Garomakak.
based off?
I think
Garomakak.
I don't know, because obviously I was sort of inheriting Nomagorok, and I sort of took that principle. I don't know where they started, but they've all sort of got that kind of Gok, that sort of name. Yeah. So I quite like it. It's quite cool.
Yeah. It reminds me of a lot of orc names. A lot of orc names, especially in
a little bit.
In Warcraft. They have a lot of Ks on their end of names. But yeah, I love ogre culture. I think that's the ogre race in Pannithor. I think is the more unique versions of ogres. They're not dumb, not bumbling idiots like they normally are interpreted. They're not savage. They're not just they are ruthless, but they're more calculated. They're more thought out. They're not just dumb idiots with big clubs. So I really like the interpretation of ogres, and this kind of elaborates on that. That they have thoughts, feelings, they have emotions, there is animosity to each other. I really do like, this is one of my more favorite stories in this particular book, because it really it explores an area that we don't really get to see much, which is ogres, but also just shows what the culture is kind of like, and there is a little bit of animosity there.
Yeah, I think for this one it was kind of, obviously ogres famously won the neutral armies, but obviously they are happy to work for everyone. So I guess I sort of wanted to look a bit more into the bad side of what happens when ogres go bad to some extent. And this, yeah, I definitely think these are like, you see it in some countries now across the world where there's a disaffected youth who feel that their lot in life has been affected by the older generations and are kind of rebelling against it. I'm not saying this is a sort of indictment of modern day life, but I think, there will be a group of ogres that are absolutely pissed off with what happened to them, because they see it as, people making decisions and taking their destiny out of their own hand. And then on top of that, not only have they lost their homes, but now, humans are, ultimately like parasites are coming in and sort of taking it over. So I think definitely sort of the Great Traitor he's at the minute, it's kind of fringe groups that will be saying that against him, but I definitely would love to explore out and out bad ogres. These are ogres that don't work for the Basileans. These are ogres, I mean, it mentions that one of them's got like abyssal runes in his armor, a shield used by a Twilight kin impaler, that sort of stuff. These are the bad
mercenaries,
guys, really. Yeah, these are the mercenaries, very much to their name. And I think these would be, and I'd love, I mean, this isn't happening, but what I would love to see, particularly for all of this in some ways, is you've got the vault now. You're doing a lot on the vault. It would be great to have upgrades for some of the plastics where you could upgrade them to have an ogre with a impaler shield, or a massive weapon or something like that, or a troll's club. I think that's ultimately where I'd love to see champions go. That you can create really customizable war bands, using, and that's like the next step. That's the advancement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the ogres, for me, personally, I love this one. I'm glad you like this one, Dave, because I thought this was a really exploring something that's interesting about the ogres that hasn't been explored before, hopefully.
Yeah. And I know that there is a story in the works by writer of Honest Price. What name him?
Mike Rossi?
Yeah, Mike Rossi. He's doing an ogre adventure. He's at least proposing it. He's talking to Winnie Sarah about it.
He sent me some. To my shame, he sent me something to check through to make sure if I agree with how he's written some bits, and I haven't read it. But luckily, I emailed him today to apologise. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because I really loved Mike's previous one. I was lucky enough to read that before it got published, and I absolutely devoured it. So yeah, anything that by Mike is a good one for me. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that.
And that kind of leads into the next one. But before I do that, Mark, what's your opinion on these ogres?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the humans are moving in because, right, after the Great Flood there, it kind of really put a hardship on the ogre land. So they were empty. And you know what humans do. So they take land. They only make it once, right? So they started moving in. And, yeah, it's an interesting take. As you guys mentioned, it's kind of like the youth of today. The old guys messed it up. Look at you, boomer type of thing.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, literally Boomer and the Ogres, right?
Absolutely. And I love the Crocodog, and particularly love it on the model. The original ones were kind of just like straight up. The one that's on the model for this is really good. It just blows me away. So I hope that we can get an updated Crocodogs for the game. I think that would be cool.
Agreed. Yeah, it'd be really good. And I think that, again, it's another one that hasn't been released. I'm very surprised they didn't release this one with the initial batch, because I think it's one of the more unique ones out there. So yeah, we'll move on to probably my favorite, definitely my favorite, and also I think a missed opportunity by Mantic, because this should have been part of the original release for Champions, I think, because I think a lot of people would have seen this and just blown their minds, especially after last year's release of the Trident Realm Frogs, and a lot of people wanting a bit more with it, and that's Axel Tricklebrook. So the too long didn't read version for Axel's story is an axolotl does a golem and has a net for 1,000 years. That's my too long didn't read version of that. So basically, Axel Tricklebrook, which we thought was going to be a halfling, but turns out Tricklebrook is apparently an axolotl name, is what we call a gilkin. So this is a brand new species. I believe this is the first time we've heard anything like this. So Axel is a gilkin, which is another Trident Realm race that was created back during the God War as well, but we just haven't seen them, and there's a reason for that. So gilkin were basically freezing to death during the Winter War, and this is about 1,200 years from when we're actually placing champions as well. So even though the River Guard were more allies than natives to the Trident Realm, because according to lore, River Guard weren't actually races created during the God War, they were just a race that was actually brought in, and they kind of helped the Trident Realm races kind of survive and explore, but they were calling them cowards because the Gilkin were basically saying they were dying, they needed to run, they needed to hide, but they were the best mages the Trident Realm had, and so the River Guard was just like, oi, no, you're being a little bit, you're being chickens here. I know your race is completely dying out and that soon you'll all be dead, but still, what about us? So it was very selfish by the River Guard, but anyway, so they decided to spread out throughout all of Pannithor and to find a place warmer during the Winter's War. So the Winter's War lasts for about 100 years, so they looks like they all spread out, and essentially they basically hibernated. And in the case of Axel, he actually went towards the abyss, found a cave, and essentially hibernated and woke up 1,200 years later. So it looks like Gilkin, they can actually hibernate, maybe slow, as some species of animal do. They slow down their heart rate, and they can live for a lot longer than normal. So it looks like they have that ability. And he also has a best friend in the case of Splish, which is a little elemental, very similar to Gwell, who's actually in Honor's Price, which is a earth elemental. And it looks like Splish is also there 1,200 years later. So it looks like it's another confirmation that elemental spirits are kind of ageless a little bit, which is something that I suspected was the case. But it looks like, here's a little bit of confirmation that even 1,200 years later, it still exists there. So yeah, Gilkin, a really cool artwork, and as I always say, I'm putting all this information on the wiki, so if you do want to see that artwork yourself, go check it out. It's one of those races I think should be a hit by people. I'd be very surprised. And an axolotl kind of race fits with the vibe of the Trident Realms, and I think it's my favorite. Straight off, it's my favorite. I really love the art. You even have Splish on the shoulder of the model, and it's very, very adorable. And I mean, even adorable, but just interesting. It's really cool to look at the artwork and the model itself. So yeah, what we do know is the Gilkin were driven to the edge of extinction. They were on the edge of dying out, I should say, during that winter war, and they end up spreading. So how many Gilkin are actually left? No idea, but as we know, they do hibernate. So for we know, could be a colony of Gilkin that hibernated somewhere, and still are hibernating. They're waiting to wake up, because in the story it is noted that Axel has a dream about something in the east. Again, what we've been hearing says armies marching from the east that froze his blood. So he was having this dream about something in the east, which it looks like it triggered him to kind of snap out of it. But again, something's coming from the east that we know about, or that we don't know about yet. So what else did I cover? We also had Maraxus, which is another name for a Gilkin mage. So Maraxus was a friend of Axel. Don't know what happened to him. But essentially they all went into hiding, and now hopefully we should start to see them within the world. That was a lot, but I'll throw it over to Rob, because this feels like one of the more unique creations of Champions.
Yeah, I think, Dave, I mean, obviously, I love Grunk. I've got to love the Goblin. I've got to say the Goblin is my favourite. But Axel is definitely a close second. And I think I wanted to do something a bit different for this one. Initially, we did look at the Champions set being all frogs, amphibians, basically. So it'd be a Pond Warden and the River Guard. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was an amphibian leader? And I thought, well, I want to do something a bit different. I know this is going to sound a bit sort of cynical, but kids love axolotls, right? They're really popular.
My niece are crazy about it in Minecraft, and I can't get away from it. Every time I play Minecraft, I have to deal with an axolotl.
Yeah. So I thought, well, this is a game to hopefully attract, the next generation of Kings of War players. So, why not look at doing something a bit kind of, well, cuter, I guess, maybe a bit more different, and not something that hasn't been done before. But of course, sort of just randomly dropping in a new race with no explanation. It's just like, hey, surprise, I'm here. So I thought, well, why potentially would, something like the Gilkin still be around? Why? And it's because, and so I thought, well, yeah, like, obviously Winter's War, you had something a bit similar with the salamanders as well. So, it changing them as they're actually how their bodies work. So, well, that potentially would be a reason for them to go into hiding. That would be, something that would happen to them. Amphibians, notoriously, they can sleep for years, like winters, and all that sort of thing. Well, yeah, potentially, these are magical sort of axolotl. Why couldn't they sleep for thousands of years? And I think now, like you're saying, there's a great opportunity for Axel to have his own story about finding his own brothers. And I think also there's a real, or sisters as well. And I think there's a real great story that potentially is he the last one? And he's got to come to grips with this world that's changed so much since he nodded off to sleep with Splish, and he was probably expecting to wake up 10, 15, 100 years later, and instead he's 1,000 years later with steel behemoths banging around, and all this sort of stuff that's happening. Huge ships, he wouldn't have seen anything like the Juggernaut, the ships that are going around. So I think for him, it potentially is a really interesting look at the world through new eyes as well, because everything's
interesting point to add on. The infant sea didn't exist when he went to sleep, because remember, the infant sea happened after the Winter's War and everything melted. Plus, the 3 realms of the Trident realm didn't exist either. They only were established after Winter's War. So he's coming back to a different Trident realm society that is not in hiding anymore, because that's the reason why they were shoved over to the Endless Seas, because they were in hiding, being hidden away from the wicked ones. They're actually now more in the public eye, because we see Naiads hanging out in Goldenhorn now, and so he's coming to a place where he was from a society that was very hidden and very kind of secret to now one being a lot more open and a lot more interactive with other races within the world. So it's kind of like a man lost at a time kind of deal. So I find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and what the other thing you'll find is that there's quite a lot of suspicion about why Axel. If I remember rightly, I haven't got the text in front of me, but like the naiads that accompany him in the Champions one are actually spying on him and reporting back to the Trident realm to say what's he doing, because why, from their point of view, he's like, well, why is he suddenly? They thought they were all gone. Why is he suddenly rocked up? What's he want? Is he there to sort of cause the trouble? Is he there to cause trouble? He's not. He's not really. Obviously something. He's woken up to help, and I think that's the idea. But I absolutely. I mean, again, Juan knocked this one out the park. I think one thing that was in the brief, but maybe didn't go on, was that obviously he's been in a lot of scrapes, and a lot of lizards and things. They sort of lose their tails and things. Amphibians as well. So I think he, for a time on his belt, he kept all the tails that he's lost. But I don't think that ended up going in the end. But I'll have to have a look on the model. But yeah, it was a little weird thing that he kept all his tails that got cut off.
Well, he does have these little kind of clips on the belt, and I can't tell if they're tails or not. But I can't
remember.
I'll have to have a look. Can interpret it. It doesn't mention what you mentioned there about the spying in the actual text itself.
No, I think it's on the unit cards.
Okay, cool. Which is annoying because for the lore we have to buy every single one just to figure out the lore, which I definitely don't have the money for.
No, I'm sure
we'll figure it out.
The overlords at Mantic will. Let me just have a look. So.
We'll figure it out of time. It's no rush, and plus we don't know when this particular one is coming out as well. It could be a while away, but again, it's one of those ones that it got me into wanting to collect Trident Realm, which is exactly what this game is intended, or this game is intended to do, is to introduce new races and new factions into your set. So I think it's a missed opportunity not having this as one of the launch ones, because I think visually it's such a grab. But I mean, I don't do the background. I don't do everything in the background, so I don't know why. But you've
got to have something to look forward to, right? That's what it is. You can't put all the cool stuff out first.
But no one knows that.
Well, that's a good point. But I think one thing is his company. I'm just looking at the background for them. There's quite a lot of tension between them, because you've got the Dambuster, you've got the River Guard, and then you've got these sort of naiads who have been assigned to them. And it said they're called Medusa's Spears, and they're constantly reporting back to the Trident realm to inform them of Axel's progress and whether he could be a threat to the realm. So he's sort of and he's accompanied by Crocker, who is like the Dambuster. He's an interesting. I think he's an interesting one about what will happen, and I don't want to say is there's going to be, we've done splits among the factions quite a lot already, so there's not going to be a split of the River Guard going off and things like that. But I definitely think we'll have to see what happens to him.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you've really revealed two things to me. One, you said Medusa again. Do you know who Medusa is? I'm just going to throw it out there. Does anyone know what Medusa is behind the scenes? Because it has been dropped quite a lot, this Medusa character.
Someone must, I don't.
I interpret it maybe a wicked one that got locked away, or it's some kind of powerful god, and Medusa keeps on coming up. So that's something to actually note, of keeping that in the back of everyone's mind, Medusa. But also, did you mention a river guard? So Crocker, did you say? Because
Crocker, yeah. So that's on his.
Is that a pond warden?
Yeah, that's the pond warden. So Springer is the actual giant, the Dambuster, the frog he's riding.
Well, that's the first time we've had the frog being named, the Dambuster being ridden, whatever's being ridden, actually have a name. But this will be the first time we actually have a named pond warden on the table. So there you go. There's a bit of a cool little tidbit for the future. Cool. I'll chuck you over to you, Mark. Now, what's your impressions of Mr. Axel?
Well, this is the best model. This one's my favorite. I can't wait for people to see it. Number 2, it is, as already been mentioned, the cutest of the models. It's got a little splish riding his shoulder, which is super cool. I think it's going to really appeal to people. And, they had those Warhammer adventure books that they had out. This is the character for the first Pannithor Adventures book. So absolutely, I just think that this particular model and everything just captures the imagination, and I really think it's going to be popular. And yes, I wish it was pushed up in the rotation. If you take a look at the blanked out or kind of fuzzed out thing, I think this is the last box in the row. So it could be the last one of the 9 coming out, but we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong, but this one's out of the park. It is great, and I can't wait.
I'll say best out of the range, to be honest. Cool.
Oh yeah,
right.
Definitely best. Yeah, definitely best out of the range. This model is a grand slam.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully we see it sooner rather than later, because I think it will grab a lot of people that were on the fence about just the models themselves, because I think the ones that we have at the moment seem very samey to what we've already got, and I think this is the I don't know if I want to say it's the only one, but it's definitely the one that grabs you visually and go, all right, this is different. This is definitely different than what we've seen in the past for Kings of War. All right, well, we'll leave that there. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of questions about all this stuff in the future, but we've got onto our final one. And that is Lethal Voidheart, which was originally known as Lethal Silverheart, which was then known as Lethal Bleakheart. So she is now known as Voidheart. And the too long didn't read version is an uncle gives a niece a way to leave the void. The niece kills the uncle as a thanks, and the niece is a bit of a dick about it. So that is the too long didn't read version. And the summary is Lethal Bleakheart was in the void for unspecified amount of time after the events of Landfall, which is a short story that took place during the Shadowed Horizons event. Again, you can read all the short stories on Matt's website, and I've got the links on the wiki there. She was told to deliver a scroll. Actually, she was told to read it, so she something happened to this scroll. It's very vague what happens, but she was told to read it, but she didn't do that, so she's not really doing what she should have done from when she was cursed into the void by Miguel. There's notes them some trippy stuff, some time bendy, wibbly wobbly Doctor Who shenanigans happening there, but ultimately she comes upon her uncle, which is in a library, which actually throws back to a short story Rob actually did, which it was a little bit considered about lost media because it was only in a newsletter, which thankfully Rob was able to send to me, and we've put it on to the wiki as well for anyone to read about her uncle. What was it? Catharon Silverheart. Silverheart. Cathaon Silverheart, which actually talks about this library that he's in. But interesting that he's obviously been in the void a while. He's got a little eye that's on his stomach, on his chest. He's obviously getting corrupt as well, and it's because of this guy is the reason Lethal pretty much ended up all voidy and on the side of the Twilight kin. So the library appears. Her uncle gives her a way out, a little bit of a scroll, and it turns out they need a sacrifice in all this work. Her uncle, sorry, I should say, points out, there's plenty of people in the void that you can use, but instead she decides to kill him, which is family dynamics are always great. He dies. The sacrifice is made. She ends up having this weird kind of transformation of many different variants or timelines. It's very wibbly wobbly again, but eventually she evolves into what we see now as Lethal Voidheart with those Nightstalker legs, and she is now out for revenge. Now, whether she's out for revenge against Miguel or revenge just in general, not really sure, but either way, she's not very happy. But it sounds like she's able to escape. So a few facts that we found here. So the void seems to show different realities of a Pannithor, or maybe different times. It's quite interesting because I think this is the first time we've actually seen some of the more trippy stuff of the void. It actually kind of dives into the whole how Nightstalkers come from the void. Nightstalkers are also in the Warpath universe. Whether this kind of could be a fancy trippy way of kind of connecting why Nightstalkers and Bane specifically appears in both versions of that. Whether they're in different realities, but they still can cross across streams and so forth. So Cathon Silverheart was last seen in the Curse of the Silverheart short story. I encourage anyone that's interested in Twilight to read that. It's a quite interesting read. And also, it appears Lethal is now escaped and is now walking around with purple spider legs. And it's quite unclear whether she fulfilled her purpose in the void or what her purpose actually was in the void. All it was is that she was supposed to greet someone in the void, and whether that comes back in the future, who knows. But you know who might know would be the writer of all those stories that I mentioned, including this one, Rob. What's your thoughts on all that? You can reveal what you want to reveal.
Yeah, so I think Lethal's a really interesting one. I really like Lethal. And I've been quite... Because she was one of the characters that it's been quite nice to have the opportunity to explore her character fully from that initial sort of accidentally, she thinks accidentally opening a portal to the Nightstalkers back in the edge of the abyss. You could see that she was sort of starting to lose a grip on reality. They sort of have that meeting of like the council where they decide what they're going to do, and she's clearly lost the plot at that point. But then for her to come back in League of Infamy, where she's truly gone off the deep end, and now we sort of see her like, I guess it's like, this is like Pokemon. This is her final evolution. So yeah, now she's taken on a new form. Obviously, what you're right about the Void doing some pretty wibbly wobbly stuff. Is this the true version of Lethal? Is this actually a Lethal? It's kind of done some weird things. And obviously she got sent back, she got sort of banished into there by McHale. So she's coming out pretty pissed with him because she's, I think what happened in the campaign, she doesn't really feel like it was her fault. So yeah, she's sort of like coming out for a little bit of vengeance there. So yeah, she's interesting. There's a little bit of kind of mention again, something else ties up. I won't spoil that one, but it in the kind of fluff for the units, it ties it back to a really old life, back to when she was Lethal Silverheart. There's quite a fun little nod there, and again, just to reward those people that have been following her character right from the beginning. But yeah, I'm sort of really glad that I got the opportunity, not just for Lethal to get sort of sent up into the void, never to be seen again, and now she's back in this sort of evolved form.
And for those that want to catch up and that maybe they came to the game a little bit late, I've spent a good portion of time recently fleshing out her wiki page. So I've put all the short stories there. You can even link to the Curse of the Silverheart. You'll be able to read it for yourself if you want. And I've got a really good breakdown of her timeline from her beginnings to the Edge of the Abyss to League of Infamy, to what happened during the Shadow Horizon, because she was actually appeared in 3 short stories there, and I broke that down. So if you want to catch up before diving in, that's the reason why that wiki exists. So feel free to read through it if you want to get into the loop, because I'm very proud of the page. I'm pretty proud of how much I've put into that and have that all fleshed out. And it'll be cool to add this next section and the next section, and maybe even be able to throw some past stuff in there as well. Into her actually wiki once we find out what's on the back of those cards. I think it'll be really cool to add those little tidbits, and I think this is what creates legacy, right? In a game, this is what creates connection, is having these characters that you've followed through, that you've watched evolve, that you can really engage with and follow the journey through. And I think this is what I love about lore. This is why I love about MCUs and all those shared universes, of that being able to follow a thread that's interesting all the way through from the beginning to the end, and also find out things after the fact as well, of like this actually happened. Because the Curse of the Silverheart is actually a bit of an origin story of Lethal, even though we've had her in the story for some time. We're actually getting a better indication of why she ended up the way she did. It was, Lethal's story is essentially she wanted to bring back her aunt who died. That's why that conversation started happening, of using the void to bring back someone from the dead. And again, it starts on a very noble origins and ends up to spider leg her. So it's a very fascinating story. And I'll throw it to you, Mark. What's your impressions of Lethal?
Well, I have to ask Rob. I mean, you really got to run the gambit here. You got a character that you've worked on before. You got to do a new race. You really got to run the gambit. So, which is very, very cool. Did you start out knowing that you wanted her in the Champions game?
Yes, that's a good question actually. So, I mean, I'll be honest, it was quite nice really for Matt and Ronnie. They just said, do something cool. That was literally their sort of like, we want really cool models and sort of come up with whatever you want. So obviously there was some back and forth, there were some suggestions about which ones we could do. And then, there were some slightly riskier ones like Axel, but I'm really glad that the sort of reception to Axel seems to have been quite well received, because that could dictate ones in the future. If that's the sort of angle that people like, then maybe we'll see more of that. But and it's sort of, I guess it's quite surreal now to see them coming out and just, because I guess what I didn't always have when I was at Mantic before was coming up with the creative briefs for each. Obviously we would all kind of spitball ideas, but actually from the initial literally putting together the brief for Juan, for the art, seeing that come back, making changes, and then obviously that going off to Luigi for sculpting, and all really from the lore, from the story, from the origins of what's their story and how should they look, which I suppose is maybe quite different to what Mantic's normally done. But I guess that was always Ronnie's thing, is like, we want these characters to be cool and we want them to have interesting backgrounds. So it's like, right, well, let's start there and move on. So it's been really fun, actually. It's been a really fun project, very different to anything I've done before, really.
Yeah, well, just throwing a question that we've got on our Discord, because we reached out to people on our Discord asking any questions, and Curtis reached out asking, as it's a narrative-focused game, what comes first, the lore of the companies or the rules? So from what it sounds like, there's a different approach was taken here, that you actually develop more of the lore before you really got the rules started to really get explored and expanded. Is that right to say?
Yeah, so it was sort of happening in tandem, I guess, in some state. Like, obviously, when Matt and Ronnie said, we want you to do this, it was like, okay, well, let's start, well, not with the easy bit really, it's not really the easy bit, is it, but doing the lore, let's start that bit, let's start coming up with the backgrounds, because obviously I needed to know what these characters would look like, because it would affect their potential rules as well, to some extent, a little bit. Jordan's got a big bird, well, that'd be quite hard to do rules with if he didn't have those rules to match the fact he's got this bird, this mechanical bird. So they always happened in tandem, actually, and that was quite nice. And it was even like sometimes looking at the model and going, oh, okay, well, he's got a great big hammer or this sort of thing. Maybe we should change the rules to match that. So I guess perhaps unusually, doing both at the same time was quite fun. Was quite different, rather than sort of the rules committee being sort of given, oh, here's Axel, come up with some rules for him. It was, okay, well, I want him to be a mage, so he needs to be casting a spell. And okay, well, he's a mage, so wouldn't it be cool if he had a little water elemental friend? So I think all that sort of stuff was probably quite different to maybe what normally happens.
And I think it would be a little bit more accessible for people playing them as well, of reading that lore, getting really excited about a particular character, getting that company box set. Because remember, this is just the rule book, so a lot of these characters don't come with what they would have originally got with the two-player set. So they're seeing these companies and going, all right, the Axel's really cool, I want to get Axel. And then if the rules didn't match up with their abilities, it doesn't, you have a little disconnect there. So I think definitely you get that feeling here that the lore is definitely a lot more fleshed out. I mean, there are some contradictions, in the overall lore, but that's just me being a bit of a nitpick. But it also shows that
artistic license, not contradictions. Remember, Dave.
Sorry, artistic license, my bad. But yeah, it's a good indication. It is well known that Mantic did establish a lore council, and a lot of the time the rules council had a big say in how the rules kind of pointed out. I think the lore council is a good example of the power of that can do, and mirroring those two areas up. Obviously you are going to get those things that just don't work. There's going to be things that don't work, rules versus lore. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why people love these worlds and get more invested, and it's because of these actually getting more engaged on the table and getting more engaged with the books, matching what's on the table, and the table matching what's in the books, and other stories that are taking place, and that's why I find really exciting, and I think that's why Kings of War can really show people how that can work and people can enjoy it, because fun always comes first, and everyone's fun is different. So if you're able to have people having fun in many different ways, you've won as a games company. So.
Yeah, quick shout out actually to Mark Barber, because on the law committee, because I ran some of the Basilea and stuff past him as well, because he's such an expert on it. So yeah, he helped with a little bit of when I was running past some naming conventions for him for the units as well. I must admit he had some very, very detailed answers for that, which unfortunately there wouldn't have been enough space for on the cards. But yeah, it was actually great to have that sort of expertise there to kind of go back to and say, oh, can you just have a look through this, please, and see what you think.
Yeah, Steps of Deliverance was a great book, and Mark is one of those people that he's so passionate about Pannithor, and he wants to give so much towards the world. Funny enough, now that you mentioned Mark's name, I was actually supposed to be on a podcast with him literally right now, but unfortunately this paired up with that time, so we've pushed that out. But he does a Winged Hussar podcast with Brandon, and they actually recently did a Pannithor lore one about it. And Mark's written the most books for Kings of War. I think he's written like 30 or 40% of them. He's coming out with another one. He just came out with Through Thick and Thin. He's so knowledgeable about it, and the more input we use coming from him, the better that world's going to be, because anything Basilean, he definitely has his finger on the pulse with it.
Now here's something interesting for you, Dave. I'm just looking through my messages, and I say, hi Mark, just a quick update on Alanis. To keep things simple, otherwise Naeus' brother or sister will have had to have an Elohe mother of two, potentially. Alanis is going to be his first cousin once removed. Not quite as snappy, but she can refer to him as Great Uncle Naeus.
There we go. There we go. So that was deliberate the whole
It was
time.
deliberate, yeah. You made me doubt myself, Dave, when I thought I must have thought about this.
Hey, I'm just going off the context given, so there you go. At least we can make it straight. And obviously, all the information everyone's heard today, I will update it as the embargo list, which will be today, which will be a Wednesday, hopefully. I will update all this information to the wiki as well. So if you do want to explore it yourself, obviously, this book, definitely get it. I mean, I think it's £30 on the Mantic website. Hopefully they'll come up with a PDF copy eventually. Definitely read the book if you can. But if you just want to, if you're considering getting a particular company and you just want to know about this lore a little bit more before you do that, because that could be a huge factor for you. Rules and gameplay only satisfy one part of a gamer or a fandom. So if you want to explore that, the wiki is always there. If you want to dive into that. And I've been talking a lot, so Mark, do you have any thoughts you want to throw in there?
Oh, no. I just thank Rob for joining us. I mean, this is a great deep dive into it. I'm looking forward to reading the cards and seeing how that all interacts. And then, maybe we'll have you back, Rob, after things happen there. Because the one thing I can't...
Yeah, we have to round to it.
Yeah, round 2 for more lore. And then I understand Ronnie kind of dropped that there could be another company coming out in November. So that would be a 10th company, but that's it. He just said, oops, that's a leak. So
that was news. That was news
got
to
some
me
more
as well.
lore coming. What's that?
That was news to me as well. I was like, oh, good. There we go. So I think I have my suspicions, and that will be, an interesting one. Just it'd be great to see the Underminers in miniature, right?
Oh, it'll be amazing. I think also, just from being on the outside, I think it's the Xerxes empire that we keep on getting told about. So that's my no inside knowledge, my hypothetical. I think we're finally actually going to get whatever this Xerxes empire, which some people are, there's theories out there. The best theory that I heard that I really wish was true, it's an insect-based race, but I don't know whether that's actually going to be true or not. But that would be my pie in the sky hope on that one.
Well,
and if it turns out I'm right, I'm sorry.
If only I
my
knew.
guess is people are missing the undead, and so it's Ophidia. Finally.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be Ophidia. That race, that faction's never coming. Just give up, Mark.
It's vaporware.
No, because then we can
Yeah.
recycle the Jarvis miniature and throw him in to lead the company, and I love that Jarvis character. So, we can have Jarvis go back home and lead some Ophidians in Champions. I think that one would be a fantastic add to the line.
Well, Jarvis isn't Ophidian, isn't he?
He's not. He just studies Ophidia.
Yeah, he's obsessed with them. He's like a fanboy. He's like you.
That's true. That's true.
How dare you?
No, I meant like Mark. I meant like he likes the Ophidians. Sorry, not you, Dave.
Oh, okay, good. Just making sure, because I'm a fanboy, but I also am kind of a dick about it. So I can't imagine like Jarvis going to Ophidia and just like, you guys aren't doing your culture right. You guys. Anyway, so I think we'll leave it. I think we covered everything, and this has gone on a lot longer than we thought. So yeah, thanks heaps, Mark, for popping along. There's so much more to explore, and whenever you want to be on, definitely reach out. And I can't wait to see what happens. I mean, I think we're in for a really nice trip with lore. If this is how they're going to approach lore going forward, I hope we hear more from the members of the council. I hope we hear more really good synergy between all the areas, and I think we're definitely on the right track for it.
Great.
All right, everyone. Until next time, I guess. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.